This is the Soul-Filled Sisterhood podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist and an empowerment mentor for women. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute, nor is it to convey professional, psychological, financial, or medical advice. If you could use such services, please seek them out from someone you trust. Now here is today's episode. Episode 35. Today's episode is sponsored by Nicole Burgess, Empowerment Mentor. She helps the high-achieving, introverted, and sensitive female entrepreneur end the overwhelm and stressed out cycle, create more balance between her work and personal life, so she can have deeper connections not only with her partner, her children, but herself. And if you would like to be part of a community of other introverted and sensitive female entrepreneurs, then I invite you to go out to Facebook and look up Introverted Sensitive Women Achievers and join today. Now here is today's episode. Well, welcome, sisters. I am so excited about my next guest. I have Joan Sotkin, who helps entrepreneurs and practitioners experience freedom from struggle personally, professionally, and financially. She is the expert when it comes to understanding how emotions learned in early childhood can affect a person's business and financial outcomes. Thousands have benefited from her groundbreaking book called Build Your Money Muscles and her online programs. And she has a lot of great books and online programs out on her website, which you'll find in the show notes. Joan's latest program is Rewire Your Brain for Prosperity and Financial Freedom, the connection between money and emotions, how to rewire the brain for prosperity. And I cannot wait to have this conversation with you, Joan, because you have been talking about this for a long time, and this is part of my money mindset kind of series that I've got going on. So I would love if you first share with our listeners a little bit about how you got into this type of work.
Well, bottom line, when people ask me what my credentials are, I say I was really screwed up and now I'm fine. And that sort of says the whole thing. I was sick physically, emotionally, financially. I came from a family where my father was a compulsive debtor and my mother was the co-compulsive debtor. And I just never learned what I should have learned about money. And it's like in high school, when I was in, I guess it was high school. Yeah, sophomore in high school. And my father said to me, he didn't want me asking him for money anymore. So he gave me $1,000, which in the 1950s was a considerable amount, and said, don't ask me for any more money. And I actually wrote down every single day what money I spent. And by the end of the year, I had $300 left over. And when my father went bankrupt, my mother came and borrowed my $300. I never got it back again. So, and there, I tell people that we were 5 people and 5 Capricorns. So we never touched each other. We just handed each other $20 bills. So very prototypical Capricorns. And it was a lot about money, but it wasn't necessarily a good background in it. And so I had a big business in the 1980s. I built I was the first person to market crystals and minerals for healing and meditation nationwide. I had a line of stones called Joan Stones that were in 600 stores. And I was making a fortune. I was bringing in today's money, $50,000 a month, and wound up going bankrupt because I didn't know how to manage cash flow. So that really taught me that I even though I was keeping track of everything, I really had to learn a lot of stuff I didn't know. And this was before the internet. And the bank, when I used to go to the bank, they thought it was cute that this woman was making all this money selling crystals. And so they just kept lending me money. And that was not the answer for me. And then, when I went to, I guess it was when I went to Codependence Anonymous, and I realized that I had never learned how to really express emotions. One of our family rules, we're the only Sotkins in the whole country. And my father, who was a little nuts, he used to have these rules for Sotkins, and one of them was Sotkins don't feel. And so when I got to Codependence Anonymous and I would tell people how I felt and they clapped, oh, that was heaven for me.
Yeah.
That's when I learned I like to talk and have people clap. and so so at some point I realized I didn't know enough about emotions. And I would make a list of emotions, a long list of emotions, and then practice them every day. I mean, I had to teach myself what all these emotions were. And through Debtors Anonymous and all the anonymous programs I went to, I really began to see the connection between a lot of dysfunction, not only money, but eating, and to see how the emotions are at the core. And I learned, and then I started teaching myself and meditating a lot. At one point, I gave away everything I owned and went on this journey for a number of years, just listening to the guidance from within. And I really learned a lot about the connection between money and emotions. And I think, I've learned stuff that I haven't heard anyone else talk about on the level that I do. Mm-hmm. And I think it really makes a difference. Now, here I am, these many years later, and I'm healthy physically, emotionally, and financially. I don't worry about anything. I've learned to accept a whole lot of stuff. And I just want to teach people that no matter where they are today, they can get to where they want to be if you're willing to recognize that everything about you is a habit. And all you have to do is put in the effort and time to change your habits.
And I love that because I know I've listened to various ones of your episodes and you've talked about, one of the beginnings, this message you have, which I absolutely agree with, is that the person hasn't done anything wrong or that there's nothing wrong with them that needs fixing. You talk about it's truly caused all by the habits that aren't necessarily serving you. And it's so true that we learn these things very early on. And if we're not aware of them, we can't do anything different. And that becomes, I know you talk about also in your podcast, that people can have this mindset of everything's happening to me versus what you're saying is you're taking 100% responsibility of your life and making things happen, doing things differently, unlearning these old habits and creating something new that actually works for you.
Right. But there's a glitch to this whole theory, is that our self-concept, our identity, is developed in the first 7 years of our life, these habits that we learn. Mm-hmm. And so they become part of who we think we are.
Yes.
So changing your emotions, your thought patterns, all of these things will change your life, but it's a threat to your identity as well as a threat to your position in your peer group and a position in your family of origin. I was the identified patient in the family. What's the matter with Joni? And in order to get the attention I needed, I would put myself in these difficult financial positions and have to get rescued. That's how I knew that they loved me. Or it was a strange kind of love because they weren't crazy about lending me money and I never paid it back. And so it's a matter of being willing to go through the discomfort of change.
Yes.
And it's all about brain science, because when you're changing habits, what you're doing is creating new neural pathways in your brain. And when you go to do something, when you're going through this process of change, and you go to do something, you've got new neural pathways that you've been building up and the old neural pathways that are there. And so when you go to do something, your brain is a little confused. Old ones, new ones, who am I? What am I supposed to be doing? And it's very disorienting. And so people tend to go back to what they used to be doing.
Mm-hmm. It's comfortable, safe.
Right. And our brain, our amygdala, which is this little thing in your brain that is designed to keep you safe. And what it thinks is unsafe is uncertainty. When I don't know what the outcome of my new behaviors are going to be, I'm going to get scared. And so you have to learn how to thank your amygdala for trying to protect you, but no thanks, I'm going to do this anyhow.
Mm-hmm. How, I know over the years, you have definitely worked with women regarding, it's almost as if it's truly breaking free of that old identity, like you're talking about, where, oh, women don't know anything about money. Oh, you're a woman, you can't manage money. I mean, I've heard those things over the years with clients and other people who've talked with me. Now, I had more of a supportive dad, and he was like, no, you're going to learn how to manage this. This is how it's going to go, which was helpful. But how do you help some of the women really break free of a lot of those old mindsets or patterns that they learned when they were much younger so that they can be more prosperous?
Well, a lot of it is cultural as well as anything else, because I know when I was brought up, now remember, I was born in 1940, which was a while ago. And all that was expected of me was that I get married and have children. Well, I tried the getting married twice and said, that's not my idea of a good time. And so because of what was expected of me, I had to do all the cooking and the cleaning. And I had two husbands who were both compulsive debtors, you know, and I had no control. I started teaching, you know, that's not making a whole lot of money. And then I started selling books door to door, encyclopedias and great books of the Western world. And I started making really good money, and but we weren't taught how to manage it. Now you just have to decide that you're going to have a decent relationship with money. There's too much information available now for you to make have the idea that, oh, I can't do this. There's a lot of things you can't do, but you can learn. I mean, here I am at this age, and I'm still learning new stuff on a daily basis. So I remember I had this teacher in the 5th grade, Miss Veith. She looked like a character out of the Archie comics. Miss Grundy was a teacher with this little bun on the top of her head. And this old skinny woman would stand in front of the class, and she'd bend over and say, don't be an I canter. And she'd stand up and say, be an I willer. And
great advice.
Yes, it was. So, and I had her twice. So I really learned that you don't say can't. Can't is just a belief. Now, I can't become an Olympic swimmer. I can't become, certain things. I can't become a guy, which at one point I wished I was, because I didn't like the way women were treated. But can't is such a dangerous word. And, if you're not good with numbers, then learn how to be good with numbers. It's not rocket science. I mean, it's I had this image one day of numbers like little cartoon characters. And they just kind of dance around and change positions, and you just have to notice where they are. I mean, that's pretty much it,
Right.
But it's a decision. You have to make a decision. If you want to be in business, if you want to make money doing what you love to do, you also have to make the decision to develop a good relationship with money. It is amazing to me how many business owners don't take care of their money. And you can't have a successful business if you don't have the skills and the tools for making financial decisions.
I know on one of your episodes, you did talk about that. Like you oftentimes, or you had at one point in time hired out as a bookkeeper, but they don't make that decision for you of like where to put your money or anything. It's like they'll track it for you and all of that. But ultimately, like what you're saying is you do have to make that decision of learning, how do I manage it wisely and not go into debt or overspend when I don't actually have it in the bank. And
right.
Yeah, go from there.
And there are many days when I'd much rather be writing a blog post than having to figure out where I screwed up in QuickBooks. But I know I have to do it. Mm-hmm. And, this year I set myself up in QuickBooks Online. Mm-hmm. And which I like the idea, because then the accountant at the end of the year just goes right in there and takes care of everything as long as everything's up to date. Mm-hmm. But you have to keep it up to date. You have to develop the habit. It's a habit, just like everything else. And sure, some habits are more fun than others. But if you want to have a business, you have to develop that habit.
And it's, it's not like you've got to go in there and spend hours and hours. It's breaking it down into sometimes just smaller chunks as you get to build in those muscles, like you're talking about, building in that habit to go in and look at the numbers, download the numbers so that you can see where things are going and then make a more informed decision at that place then, versus the overwhelm, like, oh my gosh, I have to look at everything all at once. It's like, no, just set a timer.
Yeah. And you do it on a regular basis.
Yes.
And to look at your P&L statement and, to be able to ask questions. People say, well, I check my bank balance online every day. That's just checking to see if something bounced. That's not managing your money. So,
right.
As I said, you have to make the decision that this is, it's like there's a lot of aspects of business that are admin. I mean, I spend a lot more time administrating my business than I like, but it allows me to make money every month and year, and to take care of myself.
Right. Right.
When I see that, like this year, I had a kind of crazy year, so my income wasn't as high as it's been in the past, and so I know I don't have to worry about it. I just have to notice it. And say to myself, okay, what kind of marketing do I have to do in order to make up for the shortfall? And you learn, I think that this is part of the whole thing of learning to manage your emotions and to live in a stress-free way. Mm-hmm. And you can, we're taught to worry. Mm-hmm. I love it when they say on TV, they'll be interviewing some financial people, and they'll say, well, what is it we should worry about?
Yes, they do. Correct. Yes.
And no, there's nothing you have to worry about. I was lucky. My first spiritual teacher said worrying is a waste of time, and everything negative is a waste of time. Mm-hmm. And that was in the early 70s that I heard that. And that's how I decided to live my life, to figure out how to stop worrying and to stop having negative thoughts. Was it easy? No, it probably took me 20 years. But it's like now I don't do that negative mindset thing where you're picking on yourself and talking to yourself in the way you would never let anyone else talk to you.
Yeah.
And again, it's just a habit. It's, our thoughts, beliefs, and emotions are all habits. And if you want to get from point A to point B, you have to say, what habits do I have that are interfering with my decisions? And what habits do I have to create? Because everything you do is the result of a decision you've made. And if you can understand that, then then the question is not how do I have to become a better person? Who am I and why am I here? No, it's how am I making my decisions and what do I need to change?
Yes. And I love you also talk about, and I know in other episodes we really talk about this too, but paying attention to those thoughts, like what you're saying. The old way was, oh my gosh, I screwed up on this money thing again. I can't believe it. I'm so stupid. I'm so this, where there's zero self-compassion. And you start to have
let's talk about that and how to stop it. Okay. So the idea is you have to say to yourself, I'm going to figure out how to change how I think about myself.
Yes.
So as soon as you notice you're doing that, you shoulda, woulda, all that stuff, you just say, thank you for sharing, but we don't talk that way anymore.
Love it.
And in other words, you can't stop doing something. You have to do something else instead. Mm-hmm. So it's like if you're afraid of something, you can't stop being afraid. You have to divert your amygdala, your brain, and do something else. So a common fear is financial fear. How many people have that?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I always say it's never about money. It's always about something else. But let's assume you're afraid of losing money or not having enough. Well, then I would just stop and say a large sum of money from an unexpected source. And my brain would go, oh, yeah? Where's that coming from? and I realized that any answer I could come up with was not it, because I said an unexpected source. but it diverted my attention. It's like you're talking to a little kid who's having a crying jag, and you put a little clown toy in front of it and divert its attention, and it goes, oh, toy, right? So you just have to divert your own attention to something that's more pleasant than what you're thinking about.
Yeah. And there is that constant interruption if you're in that old cycle of going into those negative habits. And when you start to, like you're saying, being very intentional, catching it, changing it, you begin to build those new muscles in your brain. And so, yeah, the amygdala doesn't get triggered nearly as often because it's like, okay, everything is all right. It's all good. And you can move forward. I love it.
Right. And so you have to decide what I don't set doing goals as much as I set feeling goals. Mm-hmm. What do I want to be feeling in the future? Yeah. When I was setting financial goals, I would say, I don't want my bank balance to determine how I feel. Now, that's a tough one, right? Because most people, they look at their bank balance and all this shame stuff comes up.
Yeah.
Well, it has nothing to do with money. Money's not asking you to be ashamed. Mm-hmm. It's just numbers on either on the computer or on a piece of paper. And so what's wonderful is you can say, okay, what am I feeling? When you look at your numbers, you say, what am I feeling? When have I felt this before? And you'll have memories of where those feelings of shame came from. Mm-hmm. What would I rather be feeling? And do I know how to feel that? Because you may have to teach it to yourself.
Yeah. And that's very powerful. Again, it's giving yourself permission to slow down. And it's like, okay, I feel shame about this. And it's okay, so what do you want to feel? Versus staying stuck in that shame.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just a feeling. It's just a habit. And we live, shame is a big one. I'm in the midst of a coaching group now called Heal Your Money Shame. Mm-hmm. And what surprised me is that there are more men in the group than women. I mean, that really surprised me because most of these groups have mostly women. And it's understanding that there's nothing wrong with you. If you say to yourself, I really need to fix this. What's wrong with me? So many, particularly women, will say to themselves, what's wrong with me that I can't fill in the blank? Mm-hmm. Well, that's a shame statement. Mm-hmm. When you're saying what's wrong with me, that's the prototype shame statement. Mm-hmm. And the fact is, there's nothing wrong with you that needs fixing. You just have habits that don't work.
Right.
And so it's a shift and understanding that whatever you're feeling about your money has nothing to do with money. You're just bringing those feelings to your money, whether it's shame or anger or deprivation or a sense of being trapped. That's a good one. Anyone who has any kind of debt feels trapped. Mm-hmm. Well, you have the option of not feeling trapped, of just dealing with the debt.
Yeah, putting some perspective or distance on it. I love it.
Yes. And we can choose how we want to feel. Mm-hmm. It's that territory between our ears. That's the only thing we really have control over. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I went through lots of therapy and 12-step programs, and I got a lot of value out of the 12 steps. But what I don't like about them is that the 4th step is all about recognizing your character defects.
Yeah.
Well, what kind of message is that? Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with you. You don't have defects. You just never learned how to love yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You never learned how to be present with yourself and accept yourself no matter what.
I love that. That's so powerful. And I agree with it. It's like there's the 12-step programs. There's benefits in so many ways, but there is that where it feels more shaming. And
Yes.
there's definitely something wrong with you versus no, like you said, I didn't learn that. So how would I know anything different? And now,
Exactly.
There's so many opportunities to learn something different and begin to do things differently. I love it.
And when I say to people, there's nothing wrong with you that needs fixing, the most common response I get is, oh, that's good to know.
It already kind of, if there's any fear that has come into, oh my gosh, I'm going to talk to Joan today about money and how I can't manage it. I don't know how to manage it, To hear that, it's like, oh,
okay. Yeah.
Now I'm a little more open to that. Yeah. The amygdala begins to calm its butt down so that you can actually hear what's being said.
Right. And I had so much shame. I remember when I first started releasing shame, this was way back. Oh, it was after I went bankrupt. I was so filled with shame. And I just felt like it was coming out of me. Like I do this cartoon of a toothpaste tube that was being squeezed and this ribbon of shame was just coming out. And even today, when I got ready to do this group that I'm doing now, to get ready for it, I wanted to go deeper into that whole thing and really understand the shame of being a woman, the shame of not being rich. There's so many things to be ashamed of. And so I dealt with all those things before I started this group. Mm-hmm. And it's wonderful to just let all that stuff go.
What are some of the methods that worked for you to release some of those shame thoughts that were coming up or shame habits?
Well, the system that I use now really was in development all those years.
Okay.
So, like, what am I feeling? Now, people who started out like I did without much of a feeling vocabulary, how do you know what you're feeling? Mm-hmm. So what I teach people how to do is to recognize the kinesthetic experience in their physical body.
Beautiful.
In other words, do I feel a tightness in my chest? Do I feel a heaviness? People can usually feel a bit of sadness, the basic feelings, that sad, depressing feeling, which we mollify by either eating more or spending more or drinking more, to recognize what am I feeling and to just sit with the feelings. We're taught to try to get rid of the feeling when feelings by their nature have to be expressed. Mm-hmm. John Bradshaw used to call them energy and motion, emotion. Mm-hmm. And so it's allowing yourself to actually feel the feeling. Not easy for most people to do because we've been taught to bury our feelings. Mm-hmm. So let's say you're looking at your bank balance. That's a very good way of training yourself. You're looking at your bank balance and you're saying things to yourself like, oh, someone my age should be making, Joe Schmo makes more than I do, and all those shame statements that come out, and to just sit there with it and let yourself feel it. And then say to yourself, where am I feeling it? What's happening in my body that allows me to feel this shame? And when have I felt it before? Was it when mommy told me I wasn't pretty, when daddy told me I was a pain in the neck? What was it? And to remember those things and let yourself feel it. I think it's a good idea to have a partner that you work with. Mm-hmm. I call it a prosperity buddy. So if it gets too uncomfortable, you have permission to call each other so you can just kind of come out of it.
Yeah.
And then what would I rather be feeling? And do I know how to feel that?
Yeah.
Now, one of the most common ones I hear is that people have a disappointment habit. Mm. I'm so disappointed. I never get what I want. What would you rather be feeling? Well, I'd rather feel satisfied. Do you know how to feel satisfied? No, I've never felt satisfied. And then I'll take them through memories. If they have children, then they usually felt satisfied when they had their child.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel satisfied when you're walking in nature? There is a moment when you felt satisfied, because you couldn't say, I don't know how to feel it. We all have that feeling within us, and we just have to get it out.
Right.
And so then every time you feel disappointed, you take a really deep breath in, and you just say to yourself, I feel satisfied. And let yourself just feel that feeling. And what you're doing is you're telling your brain to feel satisfied instead of disappointed. Mm-hmm. And you have to do it many times for your brain to get the message. And in the meantime, on the way to satisfied, you're going to get disoriented. How can I feel satisfied? My whole life has been built around feeling disappointed. And your brain gets confused between the old neural pathways and the new ones. Mm-hmm. So you have, this is not a quick fix. Mm-hmm. Most people, we live in this age of instant gratification. Well, don't go for that ice cream cone. Just sit there with the feelings. It's like the way I trained myself. I was also an overeater. Serious overeater. Mm-hmm. And even after I gave up sugar, which I gave up 45 years ago, I haven't eaten it since. Okay, so when I open that refrigerator one more time, I stop and notice the feeling. For me, it's in like the center of my chest. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I gotta have something to eat. I gotta have something to eat. And I just stop and take a deep breath, close the refrigerator door, and let myself feel the feelings. Mm-hmm. With the money, when I get that feeling, I got to go buy this thing. I got to have it. My rule is that I have to wait at least 3 days before even considering going to buy it. Mm-hmm. And by then, the feeling's gone. Yeah. In the old days, I used to be addicted to mail order catalogs. Mm-hmm. And so the catalog would come in the mail. And what I do is I'd go through the catalog and turn over the pages of all the things I wanted. Uh-huh. And I never had to buy them. I just turned over the page, and that seemed like enough.
Yeah. It's kind of satisfied that need in that moment.
Yes. Yeah. I had to give myself permission to have it.
Yeah. Well, Joan, I so appreciate, this is great information for all my lady listeners out there who, if they have been struggling with whether it's been, the habit of disappointment regarding their money or the shame cycle that may be going on, it's like these are some concrete tools that they can begin to use to gain that awareness and begin to make those shifts. And I know because you do these mastermind groups, how often do you do that? And again, folks, her website is called Prosperity Place. And you can also find her on the Prosperity Show podcast. And I'll have these links in the show notes as well. But how often do you do your mastermind groups or the groups that you're talking about?
The way it's working out is usually the groups last for 3 months. Okay. And I've done three a year last year. Because I was testing out which ones I want to do, I want to repeat. Mm-hmm. And the shame one seems like a really good idea. Mm-hmm. Your money shame. And it's amazing how close everybody in the group is getting. Because that's all we really need is that sense of connection.
Yeah.
And so I usually pair people together. So I don't always have it easily found on my site. But if you're on if you go to the site and either sign up for my newsletter at prosperityplace.com/join now, or just anything that you do where you have to put your email address in, then you'll be. As a matter of fact, I'm offering a free copy of my PDF version of my book, Build Your Money Muscles.
Okay.
Which talks a lot about the different emotions that are involved with money, the 5 main emotions and how to recognize them. And So you can get a good start with that book. And if you go to prosperityplace.com/free BYMM, then you'll be on my list and you'll know when the next group is coming up. And I expect to do one in January.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Joan, again, for taking the time, for sharing your own personal journey and all the work that you're doing out there with not only women, but men too, and really finding that prosperity in their life, not just in their businesses, but their personal life too. Thank you so much.
And thank you for having me. I love talking about this stuff.
Thank you for listening. If you haven't already, I invite you to go out to iTunes and please leave an honest rating and review. In the podcast world, this really helps other women find the podcast and they can see if it resonates with others out there. So I really appreciate all your support and leaving me a rating.